Good. We are streaming a keynote lecture from Urban Exploration event in Košice. I would like to introduce Urban Lab Košice, that is based in Creative Industry Košice. Urban Lab Košice is run by the Culture and Creative Spaces in Cities project, funded by Creative Europe program. We are one of 7 urban labs that are testing new approaches to defining and engaging citizens in organizing cultural policies. And urban exploration is supposed to widen horizons of possibilities and take a critical stance on what the ideas of making new cultural policy means. And it is my great honor to welcome here Karol Piekarski from Media Lab Katowice, who has been for many years working on developing different approaches to exploration of data and engaging data in planning of cities. And today's lecture will give us maybe a devil's advocate approach to what to include in data visualization and how can we take this very fashionable concept into practice, but with a more distant look, and how to not to get confused and led by too much of the trends that can be ineffective. So I hope you will enjoy Karol's lecture, and now I give the floor to Karol Piekarsky.
Okay, hi. It's good to be here. Of course, I wish I had. I wish I was in Košice, but still, it's an honor, and it's really nice that I can get together with you today to discuss the data visualization. And it would have not been possible, probably even, let's say, 5 to 10 years ago, to give that kind of lecture for you, because most of the people interested in data visualization was from some other fields like finance, maybe some graphic designers, and only recently it has become something of interest to a broader audience, to people from different fields, because they realize that you can use data visualizations to communicate with a larger audience. So data visualization has become really popular recently. It has made its way to data journalism, to advertising, to commerce, even to art galleries and museums. You can see the one work from actually 2005 by Aaron Koblin that was acquired by MoMA into the permanent collection. But of course, we are interested in data visualization not just for its aesthetic qualities, but most of all because of the fact that we can use it to communicate with a larger audience, in this case with the residents of the city, with local activists and inhabitants of our cities. So it all boils down to the question of how we can engage residents with visualizations. So let's start with one case study from the Media Lab, and then I will go into details. I will try to show you how you can design better visualizations, what kind of tools you could use, and what to focus on to communicate with your audience. And then later on, you'll be able to see how we in the Media Lab have introduced this kind of tools and methods to communicate with the people in our city. Media Lab is a relatively small project, but we are funded by the city of Katowice. And at some point, a couple of years ago, we were approached by the officials with a request to promote our city at a big event, European Economic Congress in this Congress Center in the center of Katowice. And of course, we could put up a few roll-ups, maybe some flyers, and invite people for refreshments, and we would be done with that. But if we thought that since we have this kind of opportunity to do something nice, we wanted to use it for our purposes, like making some kind of research, something useful to also to us. So we decided to design a poll for the people who visited this event. You can see it here. So you were able to vote and to tell about your perceptions of Katowice, because we were interested in how people see the city has changed in recent years. So there are a lot of stereotypes about Katowice. We tried to fight back, and we were interested in that particular question. So we designed it in a way that we had people going around the place asking the visitors the simple questions. So you should only tell that you recognize Katowice as a city of sport, greenery, culture, and so on. And we were interested in where people were coming from, whether they were from Katowice or the metropolitan region, and maybe from outside of the city. And this is what it looked like. It was, I have to say, quite successful. We managed to obtain 1,000 votes. 1,000 people interacted with us, so which was like around 10% of the whole event participants. And what was nice about that people came to us. They were coming like each day. The same people check, the results, because once you voted, you could check the result immediately on either on the website that you've seen a second before, or on those large screens here. So people were really interested in how we are doing with that. But of course, we also surveyed the people all over the place, and not just those who were milling around this stand of us here. And what we learned from this study was that something pretty interesting. You can see it here that, of course, like most of the people recognize Katowice as a city of industry, but culture was on the second place. And then, of course, business, because it was a business-oriented event, but also science and sport. But if you looked at the same results, but how people living in Katowice responded, you could see the huge difference here. Look, like among people from Katowice and the area, just half of them responded that industry is our thing, compared to 73% from outside. But people mostly recognized the city of Katowice with culture, science, and also greenery to some extent. So we could see like some kind of disparity between how we are perceived from outside and what we think about ourselves, as inhabitants. And what you can also learn from that project is that you don't need to create like very fancy visualization in order to actually draw the attention of people. You can see that these are very simple bar charts that were developed 200 years ago. But if you have a good idea, if it's well developed and it has a nice context, you can actually draw the attention of people and get them involved into your project. So, as I said, it's all about reaching broader audience with visualizations. And it's not that, of course, I mentioned that the data visualization is becoming more and more popular. And I think one of the most interesting areas to follow is data journalism. This is one of the services that mushroomed in recent years. It's especially devoted to data visualizations, 538. But also traditional media from different countries invest a lot of money into visualization. This is Corriere della Sera, an Italian newspaper, renowned newspaper. They actually printed those stories on paper, not just online, you can see that those are quite complex visualizations. Also in Poland, Gazeta Wyborcza invested in data visualization and data journalism, especially in the investigative journalism. But of course, data visualization is not something totally new. It was here and it was developed many years ago. And in late 18th century, for example, you could read the books with that nice visuals. But in fact, what was the most interesting from our point of view, that only at the verge of the 19th and 20th century, people started realizing that data visualization could be used not just to present numbers in a more appealing way, but also to appeal a broader population. It was, of course, connected to the changes and the revolution that were happening all over the place, industrial revolution, and everything that happened after the First War. And one of the most interesting initiatives from that time was the Isotype language developed in Vienna, in Red Vienna, very left-wing city with very progressive social politics. In 20s, they organized these kind of exhibitions to present the development of the city through infographics and data visualizations. It was open to the people, and they wanted to show off with all the developments, architectural development, social programs, and all that stuff that was going on there at the time. And they also developed a method that was called Vienna method, because way back before Isotype, if you wanted to compare different amounts of anything, you would actually scale, as you can see at this visualization, you would scale down or scale up a particular product and juxtapose it with other figures and try to present the differences by scaling down or scaling up the figures. This is what it looked like. And on this visualization, this is the number of men getting married in Germany out of every 10,000 persons. But the problem with that kind of visualization is that you can't actually compare the ratio of between that area and that area. So what I mean by that is that without those numbers here, you wouldn't be able to tell if it's just half or maybe more than half. So it was basically, a little bit useless. It was just an illustration to the numbers that you would have printed anyway. So they proposed a very simple solution to multiply the elements that you want to compare between the years in a way that it's already comprehensible. Just a simple look at this visualization can tell you which year is like the best in this case, but also what is the exact relationship between that amount and that amount. So this was called the Vienna method, and it became a standard in graphic design. It's used by today's graphic designers to visualize quantities. Isotype believed that they can reach working class people and large population of workers with those visuals. So they were meant to replace, to some extent, the natural language as a means of communication with people. So they, for example, printed a lot of books like this one, The Modern Man in the Making. They also, after the war, produced some educational books for people in Africa, or some very nice publications for kids. Okay, so based on that, what do data designers promise with their visualization? First of all, to reduce the complexity of the problem through using visualizations and presenting numbers in a more appealing visual way. Second, to make content universal and accessible. as I said, in case of Isotype. And third, to engage audience. Rather than reading some kind of boring report with a lot of numbers, they were supposed to see the visuals, to get engaged with them, and just to feel the appeal of the visualizations. And consequently, in turn, they thought that this could boost civic engagement, because in terms of Neurath, the guy who invented Isotype, he wanted really to get people involved in processes in all the city developments. He wanted them to participate in those events. But data visualization is becoming more and more popular, which means that more and more people have access to the tools, and there are more and more designers. And this good quality is not always the case. As you can see, for example, in otherwise nice publications of Okopress, the online media from Poland, you see like the legend is twice as bigger than the visualization itself here. You barely can see anything. Or for example here, which is sorry for the quality, it's a print screen from Fox News from United States. Just focus on the numbers here. It's obvious that 60 plus 63 plus 70 equals 100%, right? And by the way, this is the reason why Trump could actually win the elections this year and the second turn. And but of course, it's easy to laugh at badly designed visualizations, but there are some cases in which we encounter a very good design, very progressive visualizations, but they do not always work in a way that they are supposed to, or you would think they would. And one of that projects is on Broadway by Lev Manovich and some other great designers like Moritz Stefaner and Dominikus Baur. This is the project that we actually presented at one of our festivals in 2015 and in Katowice, because we liked it that much. It's innovative because of not just the way it presents the data, but also because of the data sources, because those images that you see here were obtained from the social media and from Google. So there are some images from Instagram, you have the street view, camera view, and you can also see some statistics like the taxi pickups and the median income at the particular place in Broadway, like the street Broadway, because it basically shows like different parts of the city, as you can see here. You can go online and interact with the with this tool. But in a way, this visualization is like problematic, I would say, because the promise was that we were supposed to get a clear image of the problem, a clear representation of facts. And here, if you look at this, if you look at this in detail, sorry, it's loading because it's a very heavy website, but you can check it on yourself later on. But the problem is that there's no story here. This is just a tool to interact with the data, to explore the data. So you cannot basically learn anything from this project real quick. I mean, you have to explore, compare the data, and it's nice, it looks nice, but it can be in a way problematic. And why problematic? Because if you design something that is interactive, you assume that people will start clicking, exploring the data. But in fact, as the New York Times researchers claim, only 10 to 15% of users, sorry, the other way around, the users only interact or click on 10 to 15% of the graphics that has been published on their website. And you have to know that New York Times is one of the best outlets there to promote data journalism. So in a way, you cannot expect people to interact with your visualization in a, let's say, a natural way. So let's focus on how to design good visualizations to make sure that they can learn something from that, or they can enjoy the exploration. So once again, on Broadway, and to understand what the problem is with this project is to realize that there are two ways of working with visualizations. And one way is to explore the data, as you could see in the case of the on Broadway. And another way is to explain something with data, as in the case of Isotype. So this is the basic thing to know, that once you start working with visualizations, you have to ask yourself whether you do this to explore the data or explain something to a broader audience. Of course, this is just a model, but in most cases, exploratory data visualization is for professionals, explanatory for broader audience. In terms of exploration, you have this is not a visual story, rather this is a data interface, as you can see. In some cases, it has a very rough layout. It's not that meticulously designed as those explanatory visualizations. Sometimes the layout is really complex, so it takes time to actually get around to this. And it's usually aimed at expert user, another random viewer. And for example, look at this visualization. Do you think it's nice? Like, do you think it's a proper visualization in a way? Of course it is, as long as you know how to read it. And this is the exploratory visualization that we use in the lab all the time to explore the data. We have some kind of idea, we have some data collected, and we want to know what's inside of that data set without like too many pre-assumptions. We use this kind of visualizations. But if you show something like that to a regular user, it will be, quite discouraging. So the first thing you do while working on your visualizations is defining your users and being aware of that explanatory and exploratory approaches in data visualization. Okay, another way of dealing with that problem of information overload is to create storytelling and maybe even scrollytelling if you are working on the online projects that someone is going to see in the browser. Okay, people are not clicking on visualizations. Okay, don't make them do this. Design it in a different way. So this is one of my favorite projects from New York Times. This is not exactly as scrollytelling, but the only way of interacting with that project is to click. So you just click through, and there's no other way to interact with it. So you can see that you cannot explore the data, you can only follow the narrative. And by the way, this is like about how the designers way back redesigned the map of the New York tube to make it more accessible to the people. But you can see here a certain trend in data storytelling, creating the stories that are not that much exploratory apps or databases, but more linear narratives that we know from cinema or from other more traditional media. Okay, another project with coming from a great publisher, which is called The Pudding. This is the outlet that publishes those narratives, online stories. And this is one of my favorites about craft beer in the United States. So this is the actual scrollytelling. You can see that I scroll and I can read the story. There's not much content here. I can just follow the narratives, but something is going on behind. And the story is building up, and only at some point, as you can see, I reach the conclusion, and I can interact with the data. So only here, having read like a couple of paragraphs, I can start playing with the data. I can explore it. So you see that this is a different approach. They could have, for example, start with just this tool, to explore the data, assuming that people will click. But people don't necessarily click, as we know from the New York Times. Okay. Okay, another thing you should take into account is user onboarding. Onboarding is a term from the UX design. When someone is entering your website, you already have the user. You should guide them somehow make them engage in the project, and this is called onboarding. And we also do something like that with data visualizations. And the first thing is to come up with a good title for your project. And of course, you have to have a good idea to explore, and you have to make sure that you can explore it with data. So you can go to the Pudding website and see a great tool that can be helpful for you, the way they work with data. So do you have a unique question? Yes, no, no. If no, start here, get back. Do you have a unique question? And the second one is, can it be answered with data? Because we've had lots of interesting questions in the lab, but it occurred that we couldn't solve them or explain them without a proper access to data. So if you don't have, you should get back, and rethink it. And only if you have it, you go farther. Okay, so you can explore it. It's a very useful tool. I will share it with you later on. As you can see, the road from the beginning to the end is quite long. Okay, and so let's imagine this case. It's a very simple graph, very rough graph that shows the population projection in Bratislava and Slovak Republic from 2015 to 2050. And this is a proper title of this chart. Population projection for Bratislava and Slovak Republic between 2015 and 2050. Sounds sexy, isn't it? So let's think if we could rewrite it a little bit, to focus the attention of readers on the actual problem. So maybe something like that. Population gap between Bratislava and the rest of the country is likely to widen. In this case, it does not need to be like a proper title of the chart, but if you use it as a comment, it can actually help you to focus the attention of the people on a problem, because they don't need to think about what's going on here. They already know that there is some gap, that it is widening, and they can see it on a chart. You can also play it a little bit harder, like adding this kind of phrase, as the capital is draining other Slovak cities, but you have to be sure that you want to be so opinionated, okay, and that you have the data to support your thesis. But you'll agree that it sounds much better than just population projection for Bratislava and Slovak Republic. Okay, so another thing on top of the title is that in some cases, you should just show your user how to interact with your app, especially if it's relatively complex. This is one of the visualizations that I like the most. It's a study of how people in Moscow use bikes, the public bikes. But as you can see, the interface is quite complex. So you can start going through this. You can go through the menu, but it takes time to really grasp the meaning of it and what you can do with this. Instead, you can use this mode here called demo mode, and you can see that it offers you a kind of story, that it is a nice introduction into the topic, because not only presents the major findings of the study, but also guide you through the interface, presenting you with the options that you have available as a user. So once you are done with this, once you know something about it, you can get back to the exploratory mode and try to play with the data and with the application yourself. Okay, and if necessary, you can also explain how to read the chart. For example, this is what we did in Katowice. We published the findings of one of our studies into cultural life online in this online report. And we wanted to use a rather complex chart, which is called box plot. And so you can see that we already here at the beginning, we decided to explain how it works. So you have this kind of bar here. This dot represents the median. And all the people, by the way, sorry, it's like the amount of money people spent at particular event or on being at the city throughout the particular event that we investigated. So all the people spent between 0 and 460 zloty, the median was 50, but half of the respondents spent between 12 and 200 zloty. And only now they can interact with the chart, but they already know how to read it. Yeah, and if they don't know, they can also click here to get reminded about what it actually means. So it's a perfectly viable solution to deal with more complex slides and charts. Okay, and if you have a lot of data, a lot of examples, you can also start with individual story, not presenting everything at once, but building the story on top of just 1 or 2 examples. So this is another example from the pudding. And it's how people, how the Wikipedia movement, traffic reacted to different events, like important events in history. And you can see that this is like Beyonce is publishing an album, but try to compare that with the moment that Prince passed out. Okay, so you can see that there are 2 cases. You go further, it's storytelling, something that you've seen before, and only here later on you can compare those 2 cases to other important events like Donald Trump inauguration, LeBron James in NBA finals, and so on, and you can compare them to the performance of this particular article. So this is one of the strategies to handle the problem of the information overflow. And the final one I would like to show you is the multi-layer content. It's actually about finding the balance between data exploration and narrative. So once again, our reports about the cultural life of the Katowice. Here we were interested in how culture and the cultural events enliven the city center. And we wanted to create a nice storytelling because we were inspired by the pudding media, but it was still a report. So we had to share somehow the findings from our report. So we tried to find something in between. So for example, your screen. So you see like traditional charts as this one here or this one, but at some point, this interaction allows you to see the major findings. So if we already focusing the attention of user on particular issues that were discovered by us in this report, but that doesn't stop anyone from data exploration and checking the results, and something they are interested in. So you see, this is like a mixed solution. You present the particular, like, let's say, case, but you give people also the opportunity to explore the data, if they wish, you know. And thanks to this, you can accommodate the needs of different audiences, because someone is just interested in major findings, but maybe someone works for this particular institution that was investigated, and they want to know the details. So they want to explore the data. So setting the information hierarchy is useful here. This is another case. I'm going to explain it in details just in a moment. But here you can see that we have different layers of content. This is the exhibition of on the history of Katowice, and we always start with the catchy title, then propose just one visualization, which is the most important, and then if someone wants to explore, they can see, you know, those details here. You can see like the second area chapter of the exhibition, the same pattern, major findings. Only then people can really explore the details of this project. And while working with complex visualizations, you want to create stories that work for like less interested users, so they can read only the major findings, but you don't want to strip all the content, all the findings, because it's going to become too shallow to other people that might be interested in the details. So again, as you can see here, in this case, you read the story, the major narrative, but at some point you can actually explore the details and see the particular findings. Okay, and it's all useful, but just the visualizations, even the best ones, are not enough to grab the attention of our audience. So that's why I would like to show you a couple of case studies from Media Lab. And I would like to present those strategies of engaging audiences in different contexts and in different cases that we did in Katowice. First of all, you heard about the stereotypes of the city. A good idea for your project is to confront the stereotypes with data. So we are perceived as a green city, the industrial city, gray city, but this is what our city looks like if you go out. And this is one of the parks that is next to the city center. This is where I go every day with my family. So Silesia, and not just Katowice, is very green, but of course there are mines, as you can see here, scattered all over the place. So who is right? Like, do we have, is this city green or, you know, gray or green? We decided to give people tools to make, so they could make their judgments. What we did with our team, we mapped all the green areas in the city in very detail, and to check what's the proportion of the whole total area of the city covered by publicly accessible greenery. Okay, so you can see here that all those areas here are actually greenery, publicly accessible greenery. This is a big forest that is in the southern part of the city. And what we did, I mean, we discovered that half of the area of the city is covered with the greenery, so it's quite nice. But the thing was that if we started digging deeper and trying to learn about the history of the city, and we realized that it's not that the amount of greenery has changed or has erased, but simply Katowice officials incorporated different areas within the borders of the city. So this is how it has changed throughout the history, from the establishment of the city to 1975, but it's comparable to what it is right now. And this is for the whole city area. However, if you compare it with the inner city, it gives you a totally different output. See, like in the city center, it has not really changed, and it's very little. We call it the green city paradox, and in order to dig deeper, we wanted to explore one other thing, like how accessible those areas are. So we measured these isochrones of the areas accessible by foot within the 15 minutes walk. This is what we did, and we overlap it with the green areas. And what we realized was something really interesting, that the city center is not that much deprived of the greenery, as you can see here, but the biggest problems are here. And you have to know that these areas are the most wanted areas among younger people, younger professionals from middle class to settle in. This is actually the direction of the Katowice urban sprawl. So this is where people want to live because they think that there's a lot of greenery, in the southern parts of the city. So, your takeaway from this project is that we don't want to actually say that these people are right or those people are right. This is the data, and you have to make up your mind, based on the data that there are available to make your judgment. This is what the best visualizations actually do. Okay, another case, pretty similar to the previous one, was this kind of map. I mean, this one is from Portland, but we loved it so much as the map of the erection dates of the buildings, the architecture in Portland, Oregon, colored with different color for different time periods. So you go somewhere and you can see that, for example, that part of the city is older than for example, this one. We wanted to have a similar map for Katowice, so we designed one. And it was a part of the exhibition. I already presented to you, I already mentioned. And I have to say it was quite successful. You can see, like, you can interact with that map. So you can see here, you can check the erection dates of particular buildings, but you can also zoom out and see some patterns. So, for example, which parts of the city were built at which area. And this project was really successful. So to the extent that we had to buy up another server, to process all the requests from the people, because so many people wanted to see this map. So we were happy. We received some nice media feedback, as it was the case with this first project at the Economic Congress. But a couple of days later, we received an email from one of the Katowice residents who claimed that he welcomed the idea of a map of Katowice buildings with enthusiasm. Unfortunately, my excitement quickly waned as I saw that a 1935 house is indicated on the map as commissioned in 1950. Is the other data equally reliable? Well, if so, this map is completely useless. And of course, we realized before we published it, we did realize that none of the dates are proper, but this is the best data that we could get. It came from the city council, so there's no better data. So what we decided to do is we decided to create a working group called Map Lab, and we organized a couple of mapathons at which people went through the historical books trying to find the proper data for the buildings. So we tried to build a community around the project and to see that knowledge is not something stored in a database, but it's something that you have to discuss, find in the books, verify, sometimes with experts from architecture. So this was our idea of how to get engaged people. Okay, and the major project I wanted to show you is that exhibition that I already mentioned. We were challenged with the concept of creating the exhibition for the 150th anniversary of our city in 2015. And we decided to create another work group, because this is what we do in the lab. We create work groups, we invite people, everyone can come in to work on a particular problem. We started doing research on Katowice, and we had to come up with the idea of how to present such a complex issue in a digestible way. And while doing this design process, we arrived at conclusion that in order to communicate with the people who are coming to Katowice, we need to rely on something that they may already know about the city, but they probably don't know too much, but they may have these kind of stereotypes that I already mentioned. So they might think that this is a city based on coal and industry, and it's not green, and so on and so on. So our major design challenge was to create an exhibition so that someone coming for, let's say, the Economic Congress to Katowice is able to get in and learn the basics of history of our city development in just 15 minutes. Okay, so this was our design challenge, and we were, of course, inspired by the Isotype language. And we designed several chapters for this exhibition, presenting those problematic issues, trying to describe with data those problematic issues for our city. One of those being the industry. So we decided to reach out to to economic data, for example, about the employment, showing that how the number of people employed in industry decreased compared to the total population of employees in the city. You can see here, it was 2013. Right now, it's even lower, I believe. But we also wanted to give the context to the reader. So we also presented the number of students in Katowice, because the first university was established in the city only in 60s. So we have not had a long tradition. And you may think, for example, that why is this number of students now falling again? I don't know, Katowice is becoming more industrial again, because our government actually support coal industry. No, you have to see the context, which is the falling population, decreasing population of the city. Yeah, so we have less students because the population of the city and also the population of Poland is shrinking. So again, we cannot answer this question whether we are a city based on services or in industry, but we can provide the data that can help readers, users to make their own decisions, to make their minds up. Another thing, for example, that we presented here, because usually if you think about the history of some place, you think about a pretty representative linear representation of facts. Yeah, so you go from point A to point B, and you struggle as a historian to represent facts as they were. We decided to not present facts in that linear way, but we decided to make some kind of claim about the city. And our idea was to change how vibrant Katowice are and how quickly they are able to accommodate and change in accordance to new circumstances. And this character of the city, we try to present, for example, through how many times the city name has changed at some point of history within just 35 years. It changed 5 times, from Katowice to Katowice, then again to Katowice at the beginning of the Second World War, then to Katowice after the war, and then to Stalinograd in 1953, to become Katowice again in 1956. So we could have written a story about the political events, wars, different countries that owned the Katowice at particular periods, but we decided to do in a different way, more tangible way, just presenting the city names to get people interested in this. But of course, you cannot be too serious. So, for example, we also wanted to do something more fancy for the people. So, for example, we decided to, like you see here, we present the tallest buildings in the city and how deep the mines are actually operating in the city, but also like for example, the number of coal that was extracted at a particular time in history. But we also did the study, the survey, and we asked the people how they received the information from this event. And one of those was, for example, has the exhibition enabled you to review the stereotypes associated with Katowice? Most of the people said probably yes. They were not sure, but the feedback was pretty positive. We actually surveyed 20% of the people that visited the exhibition, 200 people out of 1,000. And this is interesting, like which part of the exhibition attracts most attention? The film animation, because it was also there, I didn't show it. And also like which part of the exhibition conveys content in the most comprehensible way. It was like pictograms, and again, film animations and diagrams are not that popular at all. Of course, this kind of research is questionable because you cannot trust, the judgment of people. You would have to do in a different, slightly different way. But it's still quite interesting for you to see that while designing this kind of projects, don't stick to just visualizations themselves. Try to use different media to make it more fancy, more interesting in terms of the visual appeal. This is why we use those pictograms rather than just basic charts like you see here. And what was interesting as well was the answer to this question: which format of the content presentation do you prefer? Not just digital and not just traditional, but the mixed one. So try to not stick with just something that is online or something that is just on paper, printed on the wall. You can experiment and combine those in your projects. Okay, and real quick because we are running out of time, two projects that were like, this was the byproduct of the exhibition. We published the icons from the exhibition online as on Creative Commons license, so you can download them and use in your own projects. You can buy products like t-shirts or bags with them. It's quite successful, or magnets. And for example, recently we've seen this one in the city center. Of course we don't like covering the buildings with that kind of stuff, but we are happy that people are actually use it. And the final project I have for you today is the outcome of the typographic research of Katowice, in which a group of people coming for the workshops designed an actual font that you can download from our website and you can use for your projects, which is called Pischinger, which consists of 4 layers, each of which refers to a particular period in Katowice history. In modernist one, this is Fraktur from the German part of the history, and more contemporary grotesque. Okay, just to wrap it up for you real quick. How to engage through visualizations. First of all, define your audience. Second, avoid content overload as well as oversimplification. Try to find the right balance between those. Build a story or multiple micro stories on top of the database, the application that you have. Challenge users' perceptions and opinions. And leave room for interpretation. Don't create just propaganda. And be critical, because, for example, Isotype language and the people from Isotype Institute went to Soviet Union in 30s. They created or helped creating Isotype Institute that actually visualized not just the reality, but the plans that were never fulfilled. So don't trust blindly people, and especially politicians. And if you'd like to learn more, you can go to my website, where you will find this presentation And tomorrow I'm going to publish all those links and materials, URLs selected for you, handpicked just here. So thanks very much. If you have any questions, I guess this is the time to ask them, and we can also stay in touch. Just don't hesitate to write an email to me, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Karol. I think that we just fulfilled the hour, and I'm very happy that you found the time and the energy to prepare this interactive website. So I think everybody can now discover, right, on their own the particularities of different approaches of data visualization. This topic of data visualization is very important for Creative Industry Košice, and we are building on your knowledge and cooperation with you, and I think there will be a lot more in the future. So I would say thank you very much, goodbye, and stay in touch, and looking forward to having more fantastic lectures with great design in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Have a good
Enjoy
day.
your evening.
Enjoy your evening.